people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News. Okay, we'll start with this. Former WBA bantamweight champion Shannon Courtenay was in action this past weekend opposite the ring. Gemma Ruegg, her first fight since having lost the title to Jamie Mitchell, who eventually lost the title to Nina Hughes. Shannon's first fight since a much-needed leg surgery.
On the undercard of Warrington versus Lopez.
The former champion got back to her winning ways. I often talked about in previous videos Shannon Courtenay's mobility and how it's essential to her overall profile as a fighter. That's Shannon, and a part of what makes her so formidable is she's not a stationary target. She's not a flat-footed fighter. Quite the opposite. Movement has a big role in her overall implementation. Plays one, fighting out of a wide stance, chin tucked at a slight crouch, side on.
Bouncy when necessary.
Shannon Courtenay, whether you like her or not, is a very capable fighter, a very capable boxer. And now that she's got two legs, two good ones, back under her, she managed the distance well opposite the ring, Gemma Ruegg, after a lengthy stint of inactivity. Shooting that jab and setting up that right hand. She popped Gemma Ruegg several times with that right hand. I was actually surprised that Gemma Ruegg was able to withstand it.
Yeah, she had quite a few of those right hands.
I was expecting a Shannon Courtenay knockout, though perhaps it's better that Shannon didn't kill her quick because she needed those rounds. She needed to bank them. She hasn't fought in a while. There's enough ring rust she needed to shake off.
Shannon showed good movement, good setups, and Gemma Ruegg showed a good chin, good durability.
I think a more active Shannon Courtenay likely would have got the stoppage, likely would have got the knockout, but it was quite beneficial that this fight, billed as an 8-rounder, actually went 8 rounds, went the distance, because it's been a long time since Shannon Courtenay fought, and she may be opposite the ring a world champion in her very next fight, newly crowned Nina Hughes,
who was in attendance for the match, surveying the landscape, the Courtenay fight, the Bridges fight.
And I saw some gripes, some criticisms during the broadcast by way of social media when it was suggested during the broadcast that Shannon may end up fighting Nina in her very next fight. Criticisms that suggest that Shannon is not deserving of a world title shot, having sat out as long as she has and only fighting a journeywoman in Gemma Ruegg.
That's all it takes for her to get a world title shot.
But need I remind you that had Jamie Mitchell won the Nina Hughes fight, Jamie would have went straight into a Shannon Courtenay rematch. The only difference between that scenario and this one is that instead of Shannon fighting Jamie, she'll be fighting Nina. And perhaps for Nina, it's better that she gets Shannon in the ring sooner rather than later.
For more reasons than one. You don't want Shannon to bank more rounds, get sharper.
Continue to work on things and get better? No, not if you're team Nina Hughes. And Nina ain't got all the time in the world anyway. She can't wait around for the big fights and the big paydays. This is a big fight, a big-sized fight for Nina. An even bigger fight than the Jamie Mitchell fight was, because this fight would be bankrolled by Matchroom.
And it would be her first fight as a defending champion, likely the biggest purse of her career.
Myself, I'm not really against Shannon being fast-tracked to that world title shot, that world title opportunity, because that is more or less what the plan already was.
Before Jamie Mitchell lost the WBA title, and I know of no mandatories that are outstanding by way of the WBA.
So, if the way is clear, I don't see why not. If Nina wants to give Shannon a shot, more power to her. This sets up a potential unification match between two of Matchroom's Valkyries, Matchroom's champions, the winner of Courtenay versus Hughes, and Ebony Bridges, who successfully defended her blue belt, her IBF title in spectacular fashion opposite the ring, her domestic rival, Shannon O'Connell.
You know, that still leaves two-division unbeaten WBO champion of Denmark, Dina Thorslund, to deal with, as well as Yuli Hanaluna, Mexico's own WBC champion.
Two of the 4 reigning champions in the bantamweight division. You know, I thought that this year would yield at least one unification match. That hasn't happened, but it looks to be happening at some point next year. And
neither Yuli Hanaluna or Dina Thorslund Thorsland have the profile that Ebony Bridges has. I think that Ebony Bridges is the most recognizable fighter and champion at this weight. Nina Hughes is doing very well for herself as well.
Dina and Yuli Hang, they may not have the same exposure per se that either Ebony or Nina are getting, but they are in fact more experienced fighters and champions than either Ebony or Nina. And at some point, someone is going to have to deal with them.
You wonder that Shannon Courtenay shouldn't go after one of them?
It's not the craziest idea I've ever heard, though. At the same time, Matchroom didn't go as far as signing Nina Hughes to have Shannon Courtenay go and box a fighter they don't have under contract. In all likelihood, Courtenay versus Hughes will be next.
Bridges versus the winner of that fight is sure to follow.
So long as Yuli Hangaluna and Dina Thorsland can hang on to their alphabet titles, at some point, someone is going to have to deal with them.
For now, congratulations to Shannon Courtenay for securing a W this past weekend and effectively reintegrating herself into the world title picture.
A job well done.
Say, I don't care what Tank say because his opinion don't matter. I'm in the Hall of Fame, Tank. You know what I'm saying? But I will tell you this. All them dudes that you faced, all of them, I'll eat them all up. I'll eat every last one of them up. All them dudes you faced. Could you eat up all the guys that I faced, though? That's a different animal, bro. Come on.
That is recent Hall of Fame inductee Tim Bradley, now turned commentator and analyst, addressing Gervonta Davis's criticisms of him. Gervonta Davis very recently reacted to Tim Bradley's induction into the Boxing Hall of Fame, and needless to say, he was less than gracious. But what Tim had to say about it, his response, it rings true. Tim's quality of competition as a fighter versus Gervonta's, it's night and day.
First and foremost, let's address Tim's induction into the Boxing Hall of Fame and the adverse reaction it got in some boxing circles, very small ones, from guys who really aren't even boxing guys, because boxing guys know Tim Bradley was a Hall of Fame fighter.
You have a wave of newcomers, a wave of newbies, this generation of what are supposed to be fight fans who almost took offense that Tim Bradley was inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame, when anybody who's been following this sport, I mean really following this sport the last 2 decades or so, will know that Tim Bradley was very much deserving of that induction, having fought the unbeaten Devon Alexander in his heyday, the unbeaten Lamont Peterson, having shared the ring with Manny Pacquiao 3 times, and having beaten Juan Manuel Marquez, who flatlined Manny Pacquiao.
Do you remember that? Do you remember their 4th fight when Juan Manuel Marquez cold slapped Manny Pacquiao? Who do you think Juan Manuel Marquez fought right after that? He fought Tim.
And Tim beat him. That one victory alone, that one win is better than anything you'll find on Gervonta Davis's resume, or Keith Thurman's for that matter. Mix and match the names. What fighter, what victory does Keith Thurman have that compares to Tim Bradley beating Juan Manuel Marquez, who was a pound-for-pound fighter at the time?
If you compare Tim Bradley's resume yesterday to the welterweights of today,
compare his resume to Keith Thurman's, compare it to Danny Garcia's.
They both have a common opponent in Lamont Peterson, but Tim beat him first. Tim beat him when he was an unbeaten fighter. Danny didn't fight him until some years later.
And Danny Garcia's victory over that same Lamont Peterson that Tim Bradley gave his first professional loss, Danny Garcia's victory over Lamont Peterson was met with some criticism. There were a lot of people that felt Lamont did enough to win the fight.
So think about it. When you compare their resumes, not only did Tim beat Lamont Peterson first, not only did he beat Lamont Peterson before Danny Garcia beat him, but he beat him more convincingly as well, and he beat him when he was still an unbeaten fighter. You think about Tim Bradley versus Brandon Rios. Tim beat Brandon Rios and stopped Brandon Rios before Danny even shared the ring with him. If anything, Danny's resume is a
Keith Thurman's resume, Danny Garcia's resume. They pale in comparison to Tim's, because there's not a single victory on either one of those resumes that you'll find that compares to Tim Bradley beating Juan Manuel Marquez.
Sean Porter, one of my personal favorites.
He lost his IBF title to Cal Brook.
Yeah.
Lost a decision to Keith Thurman, and what was an entertaining fight, though all the same, he lost.
Yeah.
And he lost his WBC title to Errol Spence Jr. He got knocked out by Terrence Crawford.
I've always admired that Sean Porter didn't shy away from the tough fights, but neither did Tim Bradley, with the difference being that there's only one guy that beat Tim Bradley.
There are 4 guys with 4 recorded victories over Shawn Porter, Kell Brook, Keith Thurman, Errol Spence, and Terrence Crawford, whereas with Tim,
only one guy, just one guy.
only one man can say he beat Tim Bradley, and that's Manny fucking Pacquiao, a generational talent. Needless to say, there's no shame in that.
And I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me that Tim Bradley got a gift in at least one of those Pacquiao fights in the Pacquiao trilogy. You're going to tell me that he got a gift, but I can turn right around and say that about Danny Garcia against a lesser fighter.
I can say that about Danny Garcia in the Mauricio Herrera fight. We all know he didn't really win that fight. I can turn around and say that about Shawn Porter in the Yordenis Ugas fight. There were a lot of people that thought Ugas did enough to win the fight.
So don't talk to me about gifts.
Pendulum swings both ways. Gift decision or no gift decision, Tim Bradley's resume is in every way superior to Keith Thurman's resume, to Shawn Porter's resume, to Danny Garcia's resume, let alone Gervonta Davis.
I think that the reason some individuals had an adverse reaction to Tim Bradley's induction into the Boxing Hall of Fame, the reason they weren't happy about that is because in the back of their minds, they know
Tim's got a better resume than all those guys, and all those guys they like to prop up, like Danny and Shawn and Keith. The odds of them getting into the Hall based on where their resumes are now?
Yeah, good luck.
It doesn't get said enough that Tim Bradley's resume is a complete resume, a complete body of work. He shared the ring with 2 bona fide Hall of Fame fighters.
Some memorable nights. A memorable victory over the feared Ruslan Provodnikov in his heyday, the war that he and Tim had.
Addressing the gripes in association with Tim Bradley's induction into the Boxing Hall of Fame is essentially addressing the gripes of the ignorant and the uninformed, the guys that have an agenda.
Agenda-driven individuals that are upset.
Disgruntled that the welterweights that they like to talk up so much, they may not get in the Hall the same way that Tim just got in the Hall.
Yeah, both Tim Bradley and Keith Thurman lost fights to Manny Pacquiao, with the difference being Tim's got a recorded win over Juan Manuel Marquez, who's the best guy that Keith fought.
Best guy that Keith beat, I should say. And don't forget that Keith fought an older, much older version of Manny Pacquiao than the version of Pacquiao Tim shared the ring with.
Tim's induction served as a reminder that in the real world, as opposed to the digital one, many of these trolls reside in.
All those straw man arguments they like to make, and as much as they like to diminish fighters like Tim Bradley, in the real world, their annotations and anecdotes count for very little.
Because in the real world, with real people that really know boxing, they know Tim Bradley's a Hall of Fame fighter.
That's how he got in.
Say, I don't care what Tank say, because his opinion don't matter. I'm in the Hall of Fame, Tank. You know what I'm saying? But I will tell you this. All them dudes that you faced, all of them, I'll eat them all up. I'll eat every last one of them up. All them dudes you faced. Could you eat up all the guys that I faced, though? That's a different animal, bro.
Now addressing Gervonta Davis's quips and criticisms of Tim and Tim's response, Tim hit the nail on the head. When you compare the guys that Tim Bradley fought in his career, that is now ended, to the guys that Gervonta Davis has fought so far, there's no argument for Gervonta Davis to be inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame. No one he fought compares to a Manny Pacquiao or a Juan Manuel Marquez.
I think the most decorated fighter that he shared the ring with would have to be Leo Santa Cruz, and no one, I mean no one.
Nobody in boxing thinks of Leo Santa Cruz as being in the same conversation as either a Manny Pacquiao or a Juan Manuel Marquez. No one north of the border, no one south of the border. And that's the best guy that Gervonta Davis has fought so far, at least on paper.
Anecdotally, I'd say that Jose Pedraza was the best fighter that Gervonta shared the ring with. And even Jose Pedraza, 2-division champion Jose Pedraza, that name pales in comparison to the name of a Juan Manuel Marquez.
I mean, you think about the fighters that Gervonta Davis has fought so far. You know, Hugo Ruiz and Jesus Cuellar.
Off a loss.
Francisco Fonseca, Ricardo Muñez, Yuriorkis Gamboa, a very faded Yuriorkis Gamboa, a shell of his former self. He was never the same after Terrence Crawford put that beating on him.
Mario Barrios.
What's his body of work at 140 pounds look like? Who did he beat to be a somebody?
Did he beat anybody good at 140 pounds? Oh.
Who did Isaac Cruz beat when Gervonta Davis fought him? Because near as I can tell, all he was a late replacement.
Leading up to that fight, or after it, what exactly was Isaac Cruz's claim to fame? What is his claim to fame? A moral victory over Gervonta Davis? Not getting knocked out, going the distance, but still losing? Is that it?
Boxing guys, real boxing guys, don't need me to tell them that Gervonta Davis's resume is not Hall of Fame worthy, and it pales in comparison to Tim Bradley's.
Even the Ryan Garcia fight. I mean, who did Ryan Garcia beat?
If he even ends up having that fight. The Ryan Garcia fight is a commercially viable fight, and it's a commercially big fight because of the following that both fighters have. Though as far as accomplishments and what the fighters have done up until this point, Ryan Garcia is little more than a contender. That's it.
That's all.
He's not the best lightweight. He certainly isn't the best super lightweight. He hasn't proven very much in either of those weight classes that he has campaigned in. And his name, next to the name of a Pacquiao or a Marquez or a Provodnikov,
Doesn't even compare. What are you, stupid or something?
you'd have to be. The truth is that Gervonta Davis is well within his rights to turn his nose up at Tim Bradley, his legacy, his resume, and his Hall of Fame induction. But in spite of that, Gervonta Davis himself would be lucky, very lucky, if he's even considered to be inducted when the time comes. Because so far...
You didn't fight Vasyl Lomachenko. You didn't fight Tevin Farmer. You didn't fight Jezreel Corrales. You didn't fight Alberto Machado.
You didn't fight Miguel Burchelt. You didn't fight Oscar Valdez. You haven't fought Devin Haney. You're not fighting Shakur Stevenson.
You skipped out on George Kambosos, even though George's promoter, Lou, he wanted to put George in there with you, but you didn't care about George. You didn't care about his belts.
Do you think I'm suggesting that Gervonta Davis had to fight all of these people? No, he didn't have to fight all of them or even most of them. I'm saying he didn't fight any of them. He didn't fight any of his contemporaries, and he still hasn't.
Tim Bradley did. He beat unbeaten Devon Alexander, unbeaten Lamont Peterson. He took on Ruslan Provodnikov. He took on Manny Pacquiao 3 times, and Juan Manuel Marquez, who flatlined Manny Pacquiao.
Tim Bradley in his career fought his contemporaries. He might have missed 1 or 2, but you've missed all of them. Every single one.
Think you're going to get into the Hall of Fame because you decisioned Isaac Cruz or because you needed 12 rounds to stop a faded Gamboa?
On one good leg at that. What, you think you're going to get into the Hall because you beat Mario Barrios?
Something don't change. When the time comes, they're going to look back at this era and the fighters that were in it and who was fighting who.
Who fought more of their contemporaries than someone else? Who became a champion, a full-fledged champion, not to be confused with holding a secondary title like Gervonta Davis has held at lightweight and super lightweight. They're going to look at the full-fledged champions, the unified champions,
the undisputed champions, the Ring Magazine and lineal champions,
the guys with a high abundance of title defenses, the guys with a high abundance of memorable fights against noteworthy fighters. And what they'll find, if something doesn't change, is that Gervonta Davis just don't measure up, in spite of this momentary buzz that he might have here and now.
This cult following.
He's not Hall of Fame worthy.
Because he hasn't fought the kind of fighters that Tim Bradley fought in order to get in order to even be in that conversation.
I don't care how much you like the guy or if you used to live next door to him, went to school with him in kindergarten. That has fuck all to do with his resume and what he's done so far.
So he can talk. He's very good at that.
Shading everyone else for having done things that he still hasn't done and likely won't do.
That makes him feel better. Hey, you're a knockout artist, so knock yourself out.